Hello, folks. Thanks for joining us wherever you are in the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our Ask the Expert session on our vision and roadmap for strengthening zero trust in the era of hybrid work. So hopefully this is a very familiar title because this should have been the session that Joy Chick presented just a few hours ago. If you haven't had a chance to watch it yet, we'll give you some tips in a little bit how to do so. Just some ground rules real quick before we get right to the experts. You'll have a chat box, so we can't hear you. You're all muted. You'll have a chat box where you can ask questions. I'd imagine a lot of you on the call have some of the same burning questions. So what we'll do here is we'll publish them to you folks. If you see something that you're also wondering or just something that you're really interested in getting the answer to, give that a thumbs up. Our team of experts are going to go ahead and tackle those. I'll help moderate across the panel. And at the end, we're going to have a ton of resources and links for you all, so make sure you take a screenshot of that as well. A little bit of etiquette, so be prepared. This session may be recorded. Help us out a little bit. Just don't spam the questions with like 7 versions of the same question. And then if you do have one-on-one questions, that's totally okay. You could tackle it and we'll handle you individually. But please also remember to respect everybody and follow the Microsoft Code of Conduct, which hopefully this isn't the first time you've seen this during the event. Generally, like, please respect everybody, be nice to everybody, and we're going to have a really great time. So I'm Adam Harbour. I'm part of the Azure Active Directory identity marketing team, and I've got a whole team of experts here that are anxious to introduce themselves. So let's start with Ricky.
All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Ricky Pullen. I sit as part of the customer experience team here within Identity at Microsoft. So I get to work with customers all day and help make our product even better, which is really exciting. My focus especially is within Passwordless as well as the Windows Hello for Business space.
Then we'll go with Preeti.
Hello, everyone. I'm Preeti Rastogi. I'm an engineering manager on Decentralized Identity team at Microsoft. I'm so forward looking to talking and having a conversation with you all, and especially sharing the path and the work that we have done in the last couple of years in the decentralized identity space.
And I skipped our very important temporary access pass queen Inbar. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Adam. Hey, everyone. My name is Inbar Cesar-Kobrinsky. I'm a program manager on Azure AD, working on authentication methods, including temporary access pass.
And Ramiro.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ramiro Calderon, program manager in the Azure AD customer experience team, same team as Ricky, and I am paid to make you successful deploying our technology and services and learn and bring that back to the team. So I'm excited to be here and appreciate the opportunity.
Last but not least, Sana.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name's Sana Narani, and I'm also a program manager on the identity team. And I'm specifically focused on helping customers have very unique experiences with their deployments. And then also I help work with the enterprise apps and my apps teams in my current exposure.
Beautiful. Thanks, everybody. All right, so as we said, we are talking about Joy Chick's Azure AD Roadmap and Vision session, which we do hope you had the chance to watch. If you have not had the chance, it will, of course, be on demand after the event, but also you'll have a chance at 2:30 a.m. Pacific. So for those of you that are not on the Pacific time zone, that's probably a much friendlier time. Tons of news that we introduced today. So first and foremost, I think we've gotten a lot of buzz about this, passwordless authentication. Uh-oh. I think I lost my camera. It's not good. That's okay. We'll wing it. Once we get to the experts, I'll solve that. But passwordless authentication generally available. We introduced our temporary access pass. We've got verifiable credentials as part of decentralized identity, AWS OAuth. We've got auth context for conditional access. We've got ways to connect your legacy apps, new secure hybrid access partnerships, external identities, access reviews for guests and teams, and we've also got certifications. So we are here to answer all of your questions. We've got a ton of resources here as well that we'll talk about in a little bit. And I hope you're asking your questions now. But first things first, we're going to jump to Ricky, who started us off today. Ricky's also going to be representing some SME-ship around passwordless as well with Inbar in terms of TAP. So Ricky, you have the pleasure of working with all of our tremendous customers on implementing these solutions, very similar to Ramiro. What steps have other customers taken to ensure a smooth transition or rollout of passwordless deployments from enterprise and make it more manageable? And specifically, you've got probably people working from home. What about that scenario?
Right. So I think there are kind of really three big things that organizations need to keep in mind when they're trying to move towards and adopt passwordless. I think the first one is really looking at all of your use cases and looking at the technology that exists within your organization and kind of figure out, all right, what can I cover? Who really could benefit from this technology? And then figure out what they use on a day-to-day basis. And I don't think you need to worry and focus so much on who this doesn't work for, but really going passwordless means who can I get to type their password less? How can I get them out of the habit of having to do that every day? And that should really be kind of the first focus, first point. So define your use cases. Once you've figured out your use cases, start small. So start with a few potentially super technical people. It could be maybe some information workers. It could even be part of your IT staff that have different work that they have to carry out throughout the day that goes across many systems. But figure out like a good solid group of people that can actually test for you. And then lastly, when you are like really rolling this out and really ramping everything up, make sure that you have really educated your users. What should my experience be like? What should I expect? When should I see a password, if at all? Make it super clear where they can go to register or who they can go to for questions. It's generally a really smooth process, but making sure that you've done some user education so that they understand why they should even care in the first place is also a really big deal and goes a long way.
Beautiful.
And it looks like we got
you.
Adam back. So
we're back. We're back. We're doing it live, folks. We're truly doing it live. We would not leave this in the edited version. All right, Inbar, temporary access pass. A lot of folks excited about that. How do you envision customers using this new capability?
Thanks, Adam. So kind of taking a step back and setting the context, temporary access pass is a time-limited passcode that allow users to register and set up new passwordless account without actually using a password and also recover access to their account. I can share a little bit from what we've seen during the private preview of temporary access pass. Because we have temporary access pass available through the Microsoft Graph APIs, we see customers integrate the issuance of a temporary access pass into their existing onboarding processes. So for example, we have a customer who have hybrid on-prem environment and Azure AD federated applications. On-prem, they're using certificate-based authentication, and for the Azure AD federated applications, they wanted to use FIDO2 security keys. So they actually added temporary access pass APIs to internal on-prem portal where users can sign in with their certificate-based authentication and get an access pass issue on their account, so they can then use and register their FIDO2 security key. We also see customers who really take this opportunity to rethink about account onboarding and new employee onboarding in the context of COVID and remote working. So one of our customers actually is building an application to do a remote verification, a remote identity proofing, where you actually talk to someone to verify your identity. You scan your government issued ID, and eventually at the end of this process, you're issued an access pass, which you can then use in the Authenticator app and register for phone sign-in without actually using a password.
Awesome, thank you. Preeti, decentralized identity got a lot of buzz as well these past few days. Why identity? We've got solutions, we've had AD, we've got Azure AD. Why do we need decentralized identity?
Thanks, Adam. That's a great question. Today, if you see, we use digital identity at work, at home across different applications, services, different devices that we engage with. And what we are doing when we are interacting with these online services, we are giving away our personal information. And when we give away this information in the exchange for a service, we can't take it back. What does it mean? This means a digital identity and a personal information that is associated with our digital interactions are controlled by other parties, and some of which we are not even aware of. And that's why we need a decentralized identifier that gives you a complete control over your data, to whom you're sharing, how much you are sharing it, and it also gives you the ability to restrict the permission to your data access. So we believe an open standard-based decentralized identity system can unlock a new set of experiences, empowering organizations and users to have more control over their data, and also deliver a higher degree of security and trust to different organizations and service providers.
Perfect, thank you. Ramiro, auth context, also super exciting, very popular new feature as we asked in the poll during the session. How can customers use auth context in their apps?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that we kind of teased in the demo at the very end, that people writing their own applications can take advantage of it. So the way we kind of want to make this available is that when you do the authentication request to the system, you can specify the authentication method context identifier in the same way that you typically do it for authentication methods such as MFA. So for example, in OpenID Connect, we have a parameter in the request called AMR, authentication method references. So the idea is that you put that identifier of the authentication context. So you can think of it as a kind of, I would say, shortcut for those set of policies that you associated with the conditional, with the authentication context that basically would trigger based on that request. So that's how you would do it. So essentially, if you already know how to use the protocol to specify specific parameters in the request, then that's how you would trigger in your applications.
Perfect, thank you. And then Sana, customers, thinking I have ATE-FS, it's working great. Why am I going to change something? It's not broken. Why would customers bother upgrading to Azure AD? Why would they bother connecting their apps to Azure AD?
Yeah, Adam, that's a great question. And some of the key reasons are that it helps you reduce your costs and it helps you reduce the hassle of managing your on-premise infrastructure. The other reason is that it gives you Azure AD as a single control plane for your identity and access management. So for example, it gives you, if you go into Azure AD, you can get single sign-on for all your applications that are integrated with Azure AD. Additionally, you can get automated user provisioning and deprovisioning of your users, and it helps you reduce admin costs. You can also secure your access to your apps with conditional access, and you can have user and sign-in risk-based policies. And then you can also govern access to your applications with some of the governance features. We have entitlement management, we have access reviews that you can set, and this can help you make sure that you have access to the right people have access at any given time to the applications. So it gives you a whole gamut of features that you can all control from one location.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Embar, how do we harden the security around temporary access pass?
So temporary access pass includes is part of the authentication method policies that we have in Azure AD. And as part of the policy, you can decide how much you want to harden the security around temporary access pass. You can decide the duration of the passes that will be created in your tenant, the minimum and maximum. You can decide if you want to limit the temporary access pass in your tenant to be a one-time use, scope it to specific users and groups. And really, because we have those APIs, I think that's the key point where every customer can put their identity proofing processes and employee onboarding processes that make sense for them in place before actually issuing the temporary access pass on the users.
Perfect. Ricky, more passwordless. Passwordless super popular. How do you move to passwordless, especially if you're using like legacy ATE-FS or legacy apps that require a password?
Yeah, so this is a question that we actually get asked all the time. And when it comes to legacy applications, really, we know that can often be like the dumpster fire that no one really thinks about, where you're just kind of like, oh, there's these apps that exist over here. We're not really going to worry about them. But at some point, you have to deal with those. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like refactoring that specific application and getting it to plug into our authentication libraries. I think probably the easiest win for going passwordless on these types of things, especially with apps that are legacy, is something like App Proxy that you can use to proxy those applications out, and you can at least front that app with Passwordless for authentications that hit Azure AD. For anything that's plugged into ATE-FS, and this is to Sana's point that she was talking about a little bit earlier, is look for ways that you can move those applications off of ATE-FS and over to Azure AD. They're really, ATE-FS is a really great tool, and we realize that it is super beneficial in a lot of use cases. But when I'm working with customers, more often than not, it's easy to get that switched over, and then you have all the security goodness that comes with conditional access, that comes with passwordless, and then you get to have like a security posture that just sticks for every single application that exists across your entire digital estate. So moving those apps over to Azure really is that first step for moving towards passwordless.
Perfect. Thanks, Ricky. Preeti, a little bit more decentralized identity. So we talked about why we need it. What about how are they different? What is it different than what we have today?
So the verifiable credentials that we are using, which is based on decentralized identity. The basic difference between the decentralized identity is that it's you who control your identity. It's who you manage your identity. There is no centralized authority. Whereas in the traditional identity system, the most commonly used digital identifier is either your username and email address. And if you think of these common digital identifiers, they're given to you by service providers and organizations. So going back to the same point, that means your digital identity is controlled by other parties and managed by other parties. Now, what some of the advantages of when in the traditional identity system is that because IDPs are managing and controlling your identities, they're probably stored in some centralized repository. They're also able to help you with the key management functionalities like password reset, recovery, etc. And authentication and authorization protocols already exist for the traditional identity system like OAuth and ORDC. But when you come to the decentralized identity, where you yourself own your identity, there is no centralized authority. Your identity is a decentralized identifier, which is anchored or which is stored in some decentralized distributed repository. So that's one difference. The second difference is the DID, which is a decentralized identifier, is tied to a device now, which means the key management functionalities like password recovery, credential revocation is more challenging. Because if you want to do a backup recovery on a different device, how do you go about it? And those are some of the work which is going in progress right now. The third one is the authentication and authorization is now based on decentralized identity. And the protocols are not there yet. We need to extend our existing protocols like OpenID Connect that can be used for DID-based authentication or exchange of verifiable credential based on that. So those are some of the differences between the traditional identity with respect to a decentralized identity.
Perfect, sounds good. Sana, so speaking of protocols, do the apps that people want to migrate to Azure AD, do they need to use modern protocols, right? Are we just moving the latest and greatest, or what about the stuff that I've had sitting around for quite a while? What can I do with those?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you can actually migrate over any apps. We have some deployment guidance that you can follow, and it gives you an outline of some of the modern and legacy protocol applications that you can migrate over. And then you can also reconfigure any sort of apps you have to authenticate to Azure AD. And we have a whole slew of guidance for that. So for example, if you have line of business apps, you can use the Microsoft Identity Platform and ensure that your app will support single sign-on. You can also use any sort of built-in connectors that we have in our app gallery. You can also register the application in Azure AD if you don't see it in our app gallery. And if your app uses some sort of older protocol, then you can also integrate it by migrating it with App Proxy. So there's lots of things you can do. You can pretty much migrate any sort of app.
Perfect, thank you. And folks, we're about 10 minutes left. Please don't be shy. You've got engineering on the line right now. That's a rarity in Microsoft. You don't always get this opportunity, especially in this weird world that we're living in. So please don't be shy. You've got 10 more minutes. Ramiro, in the meantime, why even use authentication context at all, right? Why can't I just like build an app level policy?
Well, that's a great question, and that's typically what we see in applications when we land in the customers. We see a lot of applications that force, for example, MFA as part of their application logic. And the challenge with that is that not MFA is one step, but it's kind of embedding the security policy into the application. Typically, we want to evolve that security posture to add more capabilities, such as more zero trust posture with device controls, for example. And the moment that the enterprise want to go in that direction, then the application is kept stuck. We've seen other cases where applications also send I want password. And back to what Ricky and San and others were saying, those apps are not taking advantage of the passwordless and all the innovation that we are bringing the cloud at a very rapid pace. So the idea here is that you bring that control to the developer by providing that authentication context, but externalizing what that authentication context security controls are, and that gives us the ability to evolve them over time and to bring richness as the enterprise evolves.
Cool, thank you, Ramiro. Imbar, some more tap coming your way. So does temporary access pass mean we don't need to sign clients up to Azure MFA soft tokens, especially as we try and onboard YubiKey hard tokens and don't want to use soft tokens at all?
Yes, that's correct. Basically, in addition to the user not knowing their password, they don't need to register with MFA. We realized that we have some customers who want to use, for example, FIDO2 security key, but their users are in facilities where they, for example, can't use their phone. So using temporary access pass will let the user register FIDO2 security key, phone sign with authenticator app, but they don't have the prerequisite which we had until today, which is user need to use their password and use MFA.
Perfect, thank you. Preeti, back to decentralized identity. Can you share a couple scenarios, use cases where you think this is really going to help? We had the onboarding scenario. Ricky on his first day was sharing the exam credentials, but I'm sure there's so much more. We know that there's people out in the world doing more with this, and it's just just dream what can be built. Give us a couple more.
Definitely, Adam. So as you started, there is definitely skills certification where an end user can get credentials proving some sort of skills, degree, diploma that they can submit to different verifiers, especially proof of education that you can submit to recruiting firms or employers. So that's number one, and that we show the demo today. The second one is that helps in verifying information about different businesses, organizations, and people. And once you've verified their information, the credentials can be used to prove identity to different organizations. That helps in accelerating onboarding experience for the users, remote onboarding, or securing access to the apps, or enabling a simple self-service experience. The third one that I want to talk about or share is the healthcare providers. We have some organizations like NHS in UK, which are using verifiable credentials to support staff movement within different NHS organizations, where staff can have verifiable credentials that stores their verified record for employment, their clearance, and many other attributes that is needed for them to go to a particular hospital and perform some operation. The fourth one that I could think of is governments. Some of the governments are exploring if they could use verified credentials for issuing citizenship credentials, where citizens can use that credential to access some digital services across the government. So these are some of the scenario, but overall, wherever we can find a verifiable credential can be exchanged across different organizations with still keeping privacy and control are some of the scenarios that we could use.
Awesome, thank you. Sana, a little bit more on apps. How do we help people prioritize which apps they should migrate, right? Oh my gosh, I've got so many. I have a lot I need to do with my day-to-day life. What can we do for customers?
Yeah, you'd want to keep it simple, right? So if you have applications that are using modern authentication protocols like SAML or OpenID Connect, those would be no-brainers for you to migrate as soon as possible, because you would see in the migration interface that those apps are truly ready. Next, the other thing that you would definitely want to do is you'd want to check to see how much usage the apps are getting, right? You could see on a daily basis how much usage the apps are getting, on a weekly basis as well as a monthly basis, and that would help you get guidance on how to prioritize these apps. So those would be the two key things to keep in mind.
Cool, thank you. Ricky, how do you help customers choose which form factor to use, right? Windows Hello for Business, FIDO keys, auth app. In these conversations that you're having, what are some of the guidance that you give?
Yeah, so this I think can be another thing that's a little complicated or potentially confusing for our customers. Easiest place to go, aka.ms/passwordless wizard, and that will drop you right inside of a wizard in the M365 portal that will let you select personas, match those personas up with devices, and then match those devices up with passwordless recommendations. We ask you a couple questions about your environment, what those users need to do, and then at the end of the wizard, we just drop you on some recommendations that link you off to documentation walking you through exactly what you need. Easiest place to go, aka.ms/passwordless wizard.
Perfect. Looks like we're going to have time for one more question. So is this for Ramiro? This is the one right here. Sorry, I'm just trying to play catch up to the chat. Is it best practice to force users to periodically confirm their self-service password reset authentication information, but it's also best practice to use conditional access to prevent users from updating security info when they're not a trusted location? So when we switched to remote work, we had some users get totally locked out. Is there a way of managing this without completely disabling CA, conditional access?
That's a fantastic question. Definitely one that for the new reality with remote work, remote location is not like trusted location is not a right pivot. So this is where, and this is part of what Ricky and I do like day in, day out is to help customers navigate these policies. So with conditional access now, you saw in the demo that I show user actions and also the authentication context. There's one there that allows you to choose the actual security information, like security registration, security info registration, so that you can put conditional access policy that includes things like, for example, MFA or trusted device is the one that we tend to recommend for those cases. So you can mix and match depending upon what you have deployed in your organization, but you don't have to, definitely we don't want you to turn off conditional access, but you can just mix and match the different controls that we have available. One that is very popular and allows customers to have flexibility, or the users, is MFA or compliant device or hybrid AD joint device. So that gives you the ability to have multiple choices for the user depending on the scenario. So that's what I would recommend in that case.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, folks, for your time. 30 minutes are really fast. We appreciate all your engagement, and we appreciate our experts here for joining us today. Hopefully you're seeing the roadmap slide again, but the few things that I'll share with you, please go check out Joy session if you didn't watch it on demand or later tonight, tomorrow, wherever you are. We've got Joy's announcement blog that you can check out here. Mechanics, deep dive into Passwordless was fantastic. Check it out. We've got the new certs and trainings that we announced as well. Go check those out. You can try to win that in the Cloud Challenge. We've got the Azure AD blog. Always check for new Azure AD news with or without Ignite being on the horizon. We've got our new website launch. Please go check it out. Tons of great content, and follow us on social. And thanks. Have a great last little bit of Ignite. We should appreciate you all for joining us.